Hi, I'm Alicia Michelle, and as a trained and certified Christian mindset coach, I've helped hundreds of Christian women discover brain science based mindset tools to help them grow closer to God and break free from anxiety, perfectionism, people pleasing, and feeling like they're never enough. The Christian Mindset Coach is the award winning podcast that shows you how to use simple brain science principles and biblical truth to renew your mind for lasting confidence, joy, and peace. I'm so glad you're here. Grab a cozy spot and let's get started.
Hey, friend, welcome to today's episode of the Christian Mindset Coach with me, Alicia Michelle. I'm wondering if you've ever been in that place where you have tried to make change, but you feel like you keep going back to square one, or you feel like you want to make change, but then there's this temptation that keeps coming up and you just keep falling for it and you know you're not supposed to, but you just feel like you aren't strong enough in that moment. Well, I understand that, definitely been there. And today we're going to talk about a tool that you can use to help yourself in those moments, not only to follow through with change, but also to just have this inner resilience that's built inside of you. And this is a huge gift, especially if you are walking through a hard time and there's something really challenging that you just don't know if you're going to make it. You know, those all life situations that we tend to walk through sometimes, those kinds of things can really mess with our head and really give kind of shake our confidence. And so we are going to talk today about the gift of learning how to commit to ourselves and how when we make small commitments to ourselves and those build over time, it really gives us that resilience to work through these other obstacles that come our way. So I want to share with you some stories of how this has been true in my life. And actually, today is a day that I am celebrating a big commitment that I've made to myself. And that's why I'm recording this episode this day. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. And I want to give you some tips to be able to help you build commitment because I know it's not like you're wanting to purposefully self sabotage. None of us do. We all want to be more committed to certain things, but I'm going to help us kind of talk through what could be some things that are getting in the way of that. And what are some action steps that we can take to help us build that gift, truly the gift of commitment for more joy, for more resilience in our lives? I'm doing this episode today specifically because today is day 75 of the 75 Hard Challenge that my husband and I have been on. And so, first, let me explain what 75 Hard is. 75 Hard is a challenge that a certain influencer promotes where you commit to yourself for 75 days that you are going to read 10 pages of a nonfiction book every day. You're going to drink a gallon of water. You're going to work out twice a day. You're going to take your picture and you're also going to be outside for one of those exercises and you're going to not drink any alcohol or have any sugar. And as part of this commitment, you're going to probably, your body's going to change. Your body's going to be improved on the outside. But really, the goal of it has nothing to do, at least I don't think, from my perspective, with the outward change. Is really the inward change. We're building this mental toughness. And I thought it'd be interesting to create an episode like this on commitment on the 75th day that we have been going through this challenge. And I have to say that I am very happy with how this challenge has turned out. This is the first time I've done it. My husband has done it four times. This is his fourth time going through it. And of course, there's that frustration because I was kind of hoping maybe to lose a little bit of weight. I don't feel like I have a ton of weight to lose, but sure, why not tone up in these areas and things like that. And that didn't happen. I do feel like my body has changed. Like I definitely have less inflammation because the diet that we're following as part of this is the paleo diet. And I know that some of those inflammatory foods that you avoid on paleo have been an issue for me in the past. And so I was just also curious to see like after 75 days of not eating gluten or dairy or grains or any of those other triggers, beans that could be an issue, what would my body feel like? And it's been really remarkable to see the difference in my body. But at the end of it, the biggest gift that I'm walking away from is that I feel like this challenge has taught me that I am stronger than my temptations and that I don't have to know how the entire thing is going to necessarily work out when I make a commitment to myself, but that just in that moment, in that situation, I am saying yes to this commitment. And the next day will come, and then I will say yes to that commitment, and then the next day will come. And so taking it one day at a time has been really big for me, and also just recognizing that the habit that we build as doing this, it really does reinforce and make it easier to make commitment happen. And so I think we're going to talk about that idea of a flywheel in a second, but that has been a big part of why I think 75 Hard has been successful for me is that once you kind of figure out your rhythm and your routines, you just go. I mean, you just do it and you just keep doing it and you just keep showing up and you don't make any excuses. And you can't, because if you make an excuse, you get to start over on day one. So being on the end of it now at day 75, I'm really glad I did it because having a short-term commitment like this, and yes, 75 days is still a short-term commitment. Having a short-term commitment has helped me see that I can live like this. Like I can work out twice a day. I can avoid these certain foods. Like you kind of learn what you can and can't eat at restaurants and things like that. But it's also given me confidence that I don't have to live like this forever and that I can kind of amp up my health and my fitness and things like that for certain seasons. And then I can kind of go down to maybe a more manageable long-term version of all of that. And then I can amp it back up again. So we want to do this challenge around twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. We'll see how ambitious we are. But I know that I feel better. I know that I look better and just kind of overall things are functioning better in my body. But it's really depressing for me mentally to think about you're never going to be able to have this food or that food, all these things ever again. And to go into that kind of a commitment for the rest of my life was something that has been really hard for me because I know that eating gluten is a trigger for me. I know that dairy causes problems with my stomach, but I was just having a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And doing that before 75 Hard, I just never really felt rid of it. I was still having some of these inflammatory issues. And so now I'm like, okay, I can commit to doing this for 75 days. And after the 75 days, honestly, I am going to eat very similarly to what I have been eating on 75 Hard because I feel great. But I also know that I'm going to be able to give myself a little bit more freedom. And that's important. I think we have to figure out when we're making commitments to ourselves, what's realistic? What's a realistic commitment? And also, how can we keep this commitment the entire time? Something that was really important to me during this 75 Hard was finishing it. I mean, I have avoided doing it all these years, but my husband's been doing it because I've been like, well, I just know that my neck gets triggered if I do too much exercise. I know that my hips start hurting or all these random things start happening. And I'm like, I don't think I can do it for 75 days. So I modified that commitment for me this first round to be that I walked in the morning. We walked outside. One of the exercises has to be outside. So I walked outside with him in the mornings. And then in the evenings, I did yoga or sometimes I did Pilates, but typically when I did yoga, it was yin yoga, which is a very restorative, slow, you hold a pose for like 3 or 4 minutes, that kind of yoga. And that I was something that I knew that I could do for 75 days. I mean, it's still a commitment to show up and to do that for 45 minutes at night, every night, or throughout the day, along with your 45-minute walk in the morning. But it was a commitment that I knew that my body wasn't going to freak out about. It was my mind. So that would be my encouragement is when you build commitment into your life, make sure that you have realistic expectations about how to keep it going and also what's going to work for you in your mind and in your body and what's realistic. So this episode is not about 75 Hard. Like this is not an advertisement for 75 Hard. I am just saying I wanted to share that story moving into this topic of commitment because it has reinforced some of these things that we're going to talk about today for me. And just understanding how a big part of commitment, 99% of it is really in our mind. It really, really is. And we have a lot of obstacles that get in the way of it. And sometimes we think those obstacles are different from what they actually are. Like we think the obstacle is if we're on a diet and say we've chosen to not eat sugar or something during a certain season. And we think the obstacle is eating the cookie. And, it could be like our bodies physically crave sugar if we have it in our bloodstream. That's a proven fact that the microbes in our gut are actually crying out, so to speak, chemically for the triggers that they're used to when we have those chemical imbalances in our gastrointestinal tract. But the issue is saying, yeah, okay, sure, I may physically be craving it, like my body is physically craving it, but I am stronger than this. I can choose to not let anything in my life come to pass that isn't what I want for myself. I have the power to change that. And if you have not been in a place where you have built that in your life or you allowed that to accumulate, because it really is an accumulation, it's really hard to stand on that truth because you can sit there and self-talk your way into it like, I am strong. I can do this. With God's help, I can do anything. And all of those things are true. All of those things are true. But if we have been living and creating that habit over and over of we get to this place and we just kind of give in, there's not that almost like this inner energy that we've given ourselves to really believe that you can do this. Like you really can get through this. You really can say no to that cookie. You really can. And that is the gift of commitment. That is the gift of long-term commitment. And that's honestly one of the gifts that I think is the greatest gift of doing a commitment like when I went through 75 hard. So when we have that temptation to do something different, to break the commitment, there's this battle that goes on. And a lot of times, especially in the beginning of a commitment, it can go on several times a day, several times an hour even, because like we said, we haven't built up the habit of creating these certain things to make this new change happen. And we haven't built up the mental resilience to know, you really can say no to this. I really can say yes to that. We haven't built that up. And until we have that evidence in our own brain, it's like our mind is really quick to just go back to those other patterns. And so those first few weeks are so, so essential. And whenever we're trying to make that change. And the biggest issue, of course, is that when we're making these changes and we're having these battles to stay committed to something, the issue is happening within our mind. It's usually not something that can even be seen from the outside. It's not something that somebody can look at and go, oh, I can see you're really struggling in this moment. No, we often are the ones that are compromising with ourselves. And it's between us and God what those big and little compromises can be. And when we have that internal struggle, as we build up this, I'm going to call it an allowance or a piggy bank sort of mindset where we're building up more funds to believe in the fact that we can actually do this. It's really tempting to break that streak and to just break it and to kind of deplete ourselves and make that decision to just give into the temptation. But that is the biggest disservice. It's not even necessarily that, eating the cookie is bad, so to speak. It's the break in the commitment to ourselves that can be so damaging. I was listening to another podcaster recently share about how he had committed to posting on social media every day. And he had gotten to this place where he was like, I am coming to you today because I did not want to make this commitment. I did not want to show up, but I am choosing to do it, even though I'm tired, even though I'm overwhelmed, even though I'm XYZ. Here's what I'm doing. And he was sharing about that battle of he had committed to do this. And he had said that if he wasn't going to do it, then he was going to give $50 to this friend of his every day that he didn't do it. And he's like, you know what? I came to that point and I was like, I don't even really care about the $50. Sure, I'll give you $50. Like, who cares? The real thing that I know that would be broken is that commitment and that promise to myself. That's what's going to be broken. And that is the cost of doing this. And that's really kind of the point we have to get to is as that bank of encouragement builds and we see ourselves being more committed and it's growing, we realize I'm not just trying to help myself. Like we think we're going to sneak something, like sneak a cookie or something. We're not. We're actually breaking that commitment to ourselves. And that is the real damage that's being done. One of the things I want to emphasize today is many of us find that we get to those places and we think, well, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep getting in that cycle? We haven't maybe fully believed that we're worth that commitment. We've broken the commitment enough times to ourselves, or we've heard other people say over us, well, you're never going to do that, or you're never going to get through that. And it's so much easier, especially when the heat is on, to just give up, to just stop and say, you know what? I knew I couldn't do this. I knew that I wasn't going to get through this. It's exactly what I thought, and go right back to where we were. And the number of times that we have done that to ourselves, it just steals our ability to be strong, and it steals our ability to be confident in trying new things and going forward. So there's so much mental toughness and mental just gifts that can come from choosing to stay committed to ourselves and choosing to believe that we're worth the commitment. We often are way more committed to other people than we are to our own selves. How many times have you been that way with yourself where you're like, I'm going to do this for my kid, I'm going to show up every day for my job or all these things. And then we're kind of like, well, that resilience that we need to be able to do all of those things, it starts first with the resilience that we've built inside of ourselves and the ability to believe that we can keep our own commitments to ourselves. When my kids were little, and in a few other seasons I can specifically think of where we were walking through some hard stuff as a family, I really struggled with getting up, doing the thing, showing up with a good attitude, believing that we were going to get through it. And God gave me this simple concept around commitment that has really, really helped me, especially in those tough seasons. And that was I needed to find something every day where I could push myself beyond what I thought I could do and have a little victory. So for me, in one specific season I can think of when my kids were little and I was just absolutely emotionally done many days, I needed to be able to push myself physically and run and show myself that I could do this. Now, I am not a runner. I don't like to run. Run is not my favorite thing. But what it taught me was that if I could get up and do this every day, it wasn't about the physical changes in my body. It was about I am going to get up and make this commitment to myself. And I'm going to show myself that when I hit mile one, even or three-quarters of a mile, when I am just tired already and I want to give up, I can push through. I can be strong enough to do it and to stay committed to myself that I was not going to die. I was going to be okay. And that kind of reminded me of what happened with 75 Hard is I remember several times when I was like, oh, but I really want to have that cookie or I want to have that brownie or go out to dinner and have a glass of wine or different things. And it was like, yeah, so what? A friend and I were talking about this recently, and she had gone through a similar, she was on a weight loss journey and doing a very, very specific diet that she was on. But she was saying just how she'd gone to the store hungry and she was feeling like, oh, why did I do this to myself? But then she had this talk with herself where she's like, so what? You're hungry. You're going to get through it. You're going to go home and have lunch and you're going to be fine. And I think we kind of have to have those mental talks with ourselves. So that's what the running did for me during that season was it allowed me to remember and to notice and to have that victory every day that I am committed to myself. I can do this. And I'm proving it to myself every day that I can get through something that's hard and feels unmanageable and undoable. I can do that. So that is definitely an important aspect of building commitment. Like it builds that resilience in us, even if it might even be unrelated. And that kind of comes to the second point that I want to emphasize today. And that is that you're capable of a lot more than you think you are. If we've had these habits where we have started something, stopped something, started something, stopped something 1,000 times, we really can lose confidence in ourselves that we can do something. And so when we can make a commitment, even if it's for 10 days, 30 days, whatever length of time it is, when if you decide I'm going to get up for the next week and I'm going to run every morning, whatever the commitment it is to you, or I'm going to make my bed every morning. I don't know what it is for you, but some small commitment and you show up and you do it. And then at the end of that time, you realize, I did that. It wasn't that hard. I was able to get through it. There were moments that were challenging, and that's part of having an emotional reaction and feeling like we need it. But you would remember to yourself, hey, I was able to get through that. And I chose to still keep going, even though I didn't think I was going to do it, or I didn't want to do it, or didn't feel good. And I saw the benefits of that. So that's a gift. That is a gift that just keeps giving. And it really does change our ability to not only have more confidence in ourselves and in what God can do in us, because God can only do that. We want to do hard things for God. We want God to use us and to use me as a light in this world. Okay. But if we're not able to keep pushing through and doing these things, how is God going to do that? He can't magically make us obey like robots. We have to have that inner strength an ability to push through the hard, to work alongside the Holy Spirit to do his work in this world. So there is a very real, very powerful gift that many of us are missing out on because we have said it's, in that moment, we break that commitment to ourselves and we walk away from it. Hebrews 12, verse 11, it says, "No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it." So when we're persevering in the spirit and we're talking about character change, and if we feel like there's that change that's happening and we're like, "Ugh, I don't like it." Yeah, that's normal. That's part of a discipline almost. But in the end, the God's word even says and echoes what we know to be true in life, that it produces this harvest. It produces a harvest of righteousness if we're working towards a godly change in character. But I love that the verse says it produces a harvest of peace. When you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you can push through with God's help. Now, we're not talking about, we're strong and we can do everything on our own. We need God's help to do these things. But when we know and we've proven to ourselves that we can do hard things, there is this peace that comes. There is a settling that comes in our spirit. And we have that ability to have the courage to say, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep doing this. Now, that time of continuing to do it, continuing to say yes, that's like this flywheel that we were talking about in the beginning. If you have ever seen a wheel on, sometimes they have them at like a science museums where you can push it and it starts to turn. And if you've ever noticed how hard it is to push in the beginning to get that momentum going, or you've ever tried to like push a car that's maybe been stalled or something. And once you get it going, the momentum starts to carry itself. And that is the same thing with any change, any habits, any commitments we make to ourselves. Is in the very beginning, like we said, it is hard. It is hard because not only are we changing things in our bodies, like if we're doing a physical commitment, whether that's to not eat a certain thing or to begin working out more or something like that, or just to say no in a certain situation. But there's also these changes that are happening in our mind that when we had that trigger before, when I'm stressed, I sit in my pantry and I eat Oreos. If that's the trigger and the response that's happened every day after work for the last, 5 years of your life, then yeah, you're not only choosing to not eat the Oreo, you're choosing to break a very strong habit in your mind that's been developed. You're choosing to break a pattern that's been there and you're creating a brand new pattern. So this idea of a flywheel, when we push and we push and we push, the beginning can be tough, but it keeps going through. And it's interesting that 75 hard is 75 days, because I was thinking about this in terms of brain science. When we do brain priming, which is changing those subconscious patterns in our minds as a response to like if we feel not enough or we feel unloved, but we know it logically, but we can't believe it. Like with our actions, we notice we're not acting from that way. We can change those subconscious patterns with brain priming. And when brain priming happens, what we're doing is we are taking a pattern that has been established, again, that trigger of a certain thing happens, somebody says something specific, and then we have a response with a thought and an emotion that creates a belief. That belief creates a decision creates the action creates the result. All of that starts this chain reaction with the trigger. And if we're changing that with brain priming, what we're doing is when the trigger comes, we're choosing and building in a different thought process. So it's almost like building a bridge out to an island. We've always taken this one bridge out to an island. Well, we're building a second bridge out to that island. And what the brain does is it eventually, if you're not going to use that first bridge anymore, it starts dismantling it. And so then you're only using the second bridge that you want. So that's the power of neuroplasticity and of brain priming. My point in sharing all that is that it takes, according to the science, about 63 to 67 days for that process to the new highway or the new neural network that you're forming to be fully formed and the old one to be dismantled in the brain. So it's interesting that this concept of the flywheel and even 75 hard itself, we have to get it going and we have to keep it going. And the brain will cooperate with us. The brain will create these patterns where it's like, oh, okay, we're doing this now. We're building this now. And it begins to strengthen it. But we have to be faithful to keep it going. That's where the power of commitment comes in. And I love the verse in Galatians 6:9. It says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. God understands God understands how hard it is to make change, and he understands how hard it is to make a commitment to ourselves, that to be different, to say different things, to show up differently, try something new. He understands it. And so it's not like in all of this, it's not like we're saying, well, you just need to try harder. You just need to work harder. No, it's saying if we can make that commitment to ourselves and decide, because only we can decide what we're going to do. If we can make that commitment to ourselves, we can know that if we ask God to help us, and in that moment, we're saying, Lord, help me. And we're choosing to let him be our strength, him be our peace, him be the one who's going to help us find a way out, then we are going to be victorious. So it's not that we're trying to do this on our own. Again, it's that we are inviting God to help us reap that harvest and not be weary in doing good, because he is the one who can help us through those humps when we're just like, I don't know if I can do this. He's the one who can help us. And that's how these gifts are built. So, action step today, I want to give you two scenarios that you might fall into either of these camps. So, camp one, so to speak, is if you have been struggling with making changes, keeping yourself focused on a goal, moving towards whatever the change is in your life, and you just feel like, again, you start at square one, you go to square two, and then you stop and you go back to square one, and then this keeps repeating and you're super discouraged. I want to ask you first, if you feel like you have made that commitment to yourself, but you've lost faith in yourself that you can actually do it. Do you feel like you have lost faith in yourself, that it's possible? And if that's the case, then I encourage you to spend some time before God and ask him for help in identifying maybe how you have lost faith. Why does it make sense? What is the truth around how you can believe in yourself and start anew? What does God say about that? Sometimes we have these situations that come up where God reveals something deeper that's going on, and we can see them as an invitation, truly an invitation to deeper healing. And that healing might be the thing that's going to get you to restore your faith in yourself, to restore the commitment that you want to make to yourself and to God, that you are going to be able to make change and consistency in these areas. So asking yourself, what does God say? And how can I move forward from that? And then, maybe there is this challenge you're trying to do. What are the things that you can add in to help you stay committed? Those, not just the truths you need to hear, but maybe those specific things that you need to stay focused and faithful to finish that commitment. So that might be accountability. That might be a reward at the end of finishing a certain thing, or maybe even a discipline if something doesn't happen a certain way. You and I have all heard of these challenges where people say like, well, I'm going to give, $1,000 to this charity if I don't finish this, or these crazy things, like a charity that I don't like, so to speak. And so what is the thing that you need? It might be as simple as having someone show up with you once a week at that commitment that you're planning to do, or it might be choosing to say, hey, can I text you every 3 days or so just to check in with how I'm doing with this? Whatever it is, see what ideas come up and begin to be willing to take a risk and to put yourself out there. Maybe ask a friend to help you in that, or give you some sort of reward. This reward for me when we did 75 Hard was that I was going to be able to finish it. That was just the biggest reward to me, because I knew, number one, it was possible. My husband had done it, and I'd seen him, just how he had changed and how he had been able to make it happen. It wasn't just like some pie in the sky thing. And also, I had that built-in accountability and that discipline, that if I didn't do what I said I was going to do, part of the program is that you have to start over at day one. And I knew my husband well enough, especially since he's gone through this 4 times, that he was not going to give up. And so I was not going to be that person who stopped halfway or made an excuse or something came up. So that was my built-in accountability and really helped me make that commitment for the long term. So the other camp that you might be in terms of making a commitment to yourself, is you might be in a situation where you've just been suffering in this commitment that you're trying to make. Maybe that's a commitment to a job that you really don't like, or a commitment to a difficult family relationship to keep persevering through the challenges. Maybe there's things in your marriage that you need to work through that you've just are working so hard to stay committed to it. And it's hard. It's really hard. And so what I would say to you if you're in that camp is, I would encourage you to consider what new practices or mindsets that you can add in that are outside of that situation that can help you stay consistent and stay strong. And these are simple things that you can bring in that are just to build your inner strength. So, for example, when I was a young mom, I had many long days. As if you're a young mommy or you've gone through that season, you know what that's like. My husband traveled a ton, and I had a child who was with special needs, and we were homeschooling. And so I was home alone with a lot of kids and a lot of chaos, a lot of days. It was hard. And so one of the things that I did to help me through those seasons that were especially trying was I began running. And I may have shared about this in other episodes too, but I am not a runner. Hate running. I really, really hate running. But what I did is I did that because I knew it was one of the hardest things for me to do physically in terms of exercise, the least likely. Like I just don't like to do it. And it feels really hard when I'm doing it. So what I did was, because I ran every day a certain amount, I think it was like 2 miles, it helped me to remind myself at the end of that run every morning, even though I felt like I was gonna die, like I can't do this, this is too hard, all those things, running without stopping the whole time as I built up to that, it really taught me, hey, you got through this. You're gonna be okay. It's all right. And that gave me the strength to go back in the house and talk to my kids and work with them and to trust God again to give me the patience and the encouragement to get through that day. So, is there something that you can bring in, a daily challenge, something to remind yourself that, yes, you can get through this season? Something where you can, on a regular basis in these small ways, see that, yes, I showed up, I gave my best, I did it, and I can do hard things. Something that can remind you of that. So I just want to conclude all of this conversation just with the general reminder that commitment and consistency, the greatest gift of them is that they lead to us becoming the people that we want to be, the people that we're called to be in Christ. They build these character traits in us that eventually lead to freedom and to more joy. That is the gift ultimately of making these commitments. I mean, it's not even that we can check the box off and say, oh, I did that. No, it's the person that we become as the result of the commitment. And so that is the greatest motivation of all. And I know when you're in the middle of it and you don't want to keep going, that's not necessarily a motivation because you're frustrated. But if I could just remind us all of that the greater gift isn't even in this moment. The greater gift is the person you're becoming as because of this. And so that whole idea of you and I being able to really shape who we want to be. I mean, God is the one directing us to who we need to be and giving us the strength to step into those commitments. But we have the responsibility and the choice to choose if we're going to tap into these bigger things like living this free life in Christ, living in the joy that he promises us. Those gifts are there. Those gifts are there because we are daughters and sons that are grafted into the branch and we are part of his kingdom. But if we can't access them with these certain mindsets and habits that we've created, like being consistent and being committed to ourselves, then it's going to be really hard for us to really enjoy the full fruit of that. And so I wanted to encourage you, another great tool that has to do with developing joy, but can be a lot of these similar paths here, is this new free video teaching that I have called 10 Habits and Mindsets to Cultivate Extraordinary Joy. It is a masterclass that I put together. It's about 40 minutes, and it gives you very practical things that you and I can do right now to begin to say, I'm setting myself up to receive the gift of godly joy. Joy comes from the Holy Spirit. We can't try harder or do certain things to enable more joy, but we can, like a radio receiver, put ourselves in a place where we have set our signal up to be able to receive it well. Does that make sense? And that's what the focus is of this class, is I want to give you some habits, 5 habits and 5 mindsets that you can practice starting today. Even if you build in 1 or 2 of these things, it can begin to reawaken that joy in your life. And honestly, this joy might be the thing that gives you the ability to keep going in the commitment that's before you. So download that free teaching at aliciamichelle.com/joy. Okay? So take that next step in your journey and continue to pursue this commitment to yourself, this commitment to joy, and ultimately the commitment to following God by doing these things and living our best life. That's ultimately what we're doing here is we're saying, God, you've given me this gift of who I am as a person. You've given me this life. You've given me this personality. You've given me these talents, the people around me. Lord, help me to stay faithful. Help me to stay faithful to them so that I can be who you need me to be. All right, friend. I look forward to our next conversation. We're going to keep talking about joy, about the importance of living out all of the things that God has called us to in our next session. So take care. I look forward to our next podcast episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining me today for the Christian Mindset Coach. If you loved today's show, would you take 2 seconds and share a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts? I've got a special gift for you when you share a review, my amazing 50 I Am declarations, 50 statements and Bible verses about who you are in Christ. This is an audio meditation and a written statement that is extremely popular with my clients, and I want to give you access just for sharing your Apple Podcast review. Simply screenshot your review and send it to hello@vibrantchristianliving.com, and we'll send you the link to access the 50 I Am Declarations resource. Thanks so much for sharing your rating and review so that we can get the word out about the podcast. See you back here next week.